We are going to be presenting on Sex and Salvation, Imagining the Future in Madagascar, an ethnography done by Jennifer Cole. The group members in this group are going to be Andy Leopson, Coco Zhao, Eleanor Ball, and Jack Muir. So this is Jack Muir. I'm going to be starting off the presentation. I'll be going over some context about Jennifer Cole's ethnography, as well as delivering some key terms to kind of help with comprehension. So Sex and Salvation is, like I said, by Jennifer Cole, and she's broadly seeking to answer the questions surrounding the interrelatedness of youth and social change. Specifically, she was working within Madagascar in 2003. She opens up her ethnography at a parade for AIDS Awareness Day in Tamatave, the locality in which she is working. She briefly outlines the social changes which have taken place in the region, which are pertinent to her study. First, she outlines the economic and governmental changes which the region has gone through, shifting from a colonial province to an isolationist socialist nation to now a neoliberal democracy. She highlights these as a framework through which we can view the system of oppositions she sets up. In seeking to interpret the role of youth in social change, Cole proposes oppositions like sex workers and the church, youth and elders, and nationalist and international neoliberals. Cole suggests that these oppositions all overlap, especially within the framework of the economic history of Madagascar. Youth and neoliberalism come about in the same time span and are placed in opposition to the elderly who experience socialist economic practices. The dichotomy of sex workers and the church does not map onto these same oppositions, but Cole still places them against each other to help illustrate their mutual contributions to social constructions in the region. Alright, so moving forward, here are some key terms that are important to contextualize Cole's work. First is going to be jeunes. It's a French word, it's a holdover from French colonial rule. Jeune refers to Malagasy youth. It's sort of a catch-all term, which better refers to revolutionary youth and the ideals they represent, as opposed to an actually young person. It doesn't refer to any age, as Cole explains, but instead as to the general idea of youthfulness or revolutionary youth culture, or what we in the United States might call young people. Next is going to be the Pentecostal Church. The Pentecostal Church in this setting refers to the showing up of this new sect of Christianity in Madagascar in relatively recent terms, as a contrast to older forms of Christianity in the region. Cole describes it as emblematic of the importation of foreign goods and ideologies in the new international neoliberal economy that came after the socialist economy in Madagascar. This idea of importation of Western or foreign ideals, institutions, or ideologies is prevalent throughout Cole's ethnography. Next is going to be sexual economy. Just as it sounds, Cole is referring to the economy of sex in Madagascar. Cole describes this as being influenced by Western ideals, just as the Pentecostal Church is an ideological import. Western ideas of sexuality influence Malagasy sexual economy, as we'll get on to later in one of the other key terms. Tamatave is pretty simple. It's going to be the city in which Cole worked. It's on the eastern coast of the island. Malahilo is a Malagasy word referring to the condition of being poor. It translates through French to English as poorness, but that's either monetarily or of spirit, or feeling slighted, more specifically, as Cole suggests. Cole proposes that these feelings of Malahilo in modern day can be attributed to changes brought on by the changing economy and kind of the radical shift in economic practice in the region, how that can shift social dynamics. Moving forward, these next two are kind of the big points that Cole tries to get across and what she really built her argument on. The first is going to be disembedding. It's going to be the recontextualization of a cultural ideal or belief as they are first disembedded from their original context or situation, reformed and repackaged, and then re-embedded into new societal structures or interactions. The example she gives is practices that are initially formed in context of rural Madagascar, but then are then disembedded and then re-embedded in the context of urban, more neoliberal Madagascar in this new era. Next is going to be imagination. So this is going to be in reference to the title of Cole's ethnography. Imagination, in this sense, could also be understood as a manifestation, the way she's using it. Cole suggests that the actions of youth and the importance placed on those actions, and youths by older populations, all contribute to an idea of national progress, that the future of the nation is imagined and kind of created in the significance given to the actions and movements of youth. So it's more of not that youth, or jeunes in this case, are directly contributing to or forming the future of the Malagasy nation, but instead are representative of what the nation as a whole envisions or imagines for its future. And then finishing up, we have bazaha. This is going to be a Malagasy word for young European men who are single. This refers back to sexual economy and how that's being influenced by Western imports. And this is relevant because Cole asserts that it's common in modern day for young Malagasy women to seek to marry a bazaha as a means to increase their social status. Again, a result of Western influence on Malagasy culture. Now I'm going to hand this off to Coco.
There are 5 major questions that Cole has mentioned in the book. The first one is, how can we understand a generation and its changes that not only focus in the present, but how they imagine and seek to attain a desired future. As Cole has mentioned in Chapter 1, the generations are not simply people moving into adulthood and experience a particular historical event. Instead, the youth's understandings and representations of their life are the changes provide us, the readers, a new view to analyze their present and future. And this is a recurring theme throughout the book. The second question is, why was the book focused on women? So in the East Coast, the residents claim that women and men are differently constituted. Therefore, the kinship is bilaterally in most of the time. The new generation, however, does not produce the discontinuities in the existing pattern. The group provide a feedback loop in the culture representation, and their actions contribute to a larger process of social change. Author has focused on women and how their gender personhood, life course, and economic change made the woman considering to enter the sexual economy. The third question is how to recognize the social changes in the East Coast as general process disembodied. In Chapter 3, the author has illustrated 3 interlocutors' conversations, and she thinks what was changed and affect their life was not the social practice, yet the competitive aspects of rural life get transformed in the cities as urbanites are drawn into an increasingly monetized and consumerist economy. And it is important to realize these changes are many caused by the outsiders other than the Madagascar regions. The fourth question is, how was the changing social economy affected marriage or the young woman? So marriage also included the marriage gift and marriage building when the couples are married. In general, men take care of the outside work, while women take care of the household work. And men often seek the disciplines of their wives from like drinking, women, or short-term pleasure. Yet the tensions in marriage would exacerbate in urban areas, as many young women seeing the older women trapped by their husbands' lack of attention, resources, and had to take care of the children. The young women's thought about marriage have been changed, and eventually their values to marriage will form a new social norm among their generation. Question number 5 is, what would the woman imagine and what have they created? So I think this question summarizes all the key points above, and the author has given us the answer in the end of the book. So to summarize, the young woman who enters the sexual economy seeks seek the Europeans and imagine to build a future as valued and respected adults who can care for others under the new conditions created by the neoliberal economic reform. And what they have created is what we are seeing now. So this enormous sexual business.
In order to answer the questions that Cole proposes, she provides us with one central argument, that women along the east coast of Madagascar are forging their own paths in the new, shifting, and unpredictable social environment they live in. Her argument starts with demonstrating the increasing value and importance of money within Madagascar along the east coast, and especially in the city of Tamatave. As Madagascar has gone through increased economic liberalization, money has in turn become more and more important as a way to purchase the newest consumer goods and show off one's social status. To make money, though, people need to be living in the city, as the city is where jobs are and where there is money to be made. So young people frequently move away from the countryside in a process Cole dubs as disembedding. In this context, she uses the term to describe young people moving from rural to urban settings, and with this change becoming disconnected from their kinship support systems and traditions of rural life, to have the opportunity to create a new urban future that they envision. Children who leave their ancestral land over time show up to fewer and fewer ceremonies and are less and less beholden to the customs of rural life. As the process of disembedding occurs to greater and greater degrees, money becomes more and more important for status, showing one has achieved social adulthood, and for showing one can exist and make it in the modern world. And most importantly, having money gives someone the ability to be independent. As disembedding takes place and more people move into cities, Cole finds that women are beginning to take on new roles in life and with relation to men. Marriage in the city has taken on an entirely different character than in rural settings. Instead of the previous ideal marriage, which had more familial involvement and would have the man and woman working together to grow rice to help feed their children, now men who aspire to a middle-class job are expected to turn their money over to their wife who manages the funds. While this is the ideal scenario for the couple in the city, the marriages have tensions with men who cheat and philander, and while this might make their wives angry, they are largely dependent on their husbands. Women in rural areas gain value in marriage from both their ability to have children and their connections to land and kin groups. So even if there are marriage problems, women still have land they can control and use productively. In the city, though, women don't have access to this land and have to find ways to become more independent from their husbands who might be giving money to women they have affairs with. And for women without husbands living on their own, they must earn money in some way to maintain the social status which comes along with having money and being seen as a respectable adult. One of the main ways women are creating their own futures and realities is through sex work. Young women often see sex work as an attractive option for a few reasons. First, at the very least, it can help provide supplemental income for those who don't make enough at work or whose boyfriends can't support them. Cole talks about one woman who made only a small amount of money as a receptionist, but thanks to sex work on the side, was able to adequately support herself and even buy trendy clothing. One of the primary reasons, though, behind sex work is for women to try and find a vaza. This tends to be the goal of most jeunes because marrying a vaza is an easy path to a good and respected life in Tamatave, even among older generations who dislike the new trends of the younger generation. Though it is a risky path as well, where failure to marry a vaza can result in women being seen as unclean and being mocked in the community. Many, though, decide it's worth the social risk in order to make money and have a steady life and have a chance at marrying a vaza. The other common path women take is joining the Pentecostal church. As mentioned earlier in the presentation when discussing the church, it was a new sect of Christianity which recently arrived and truly imbibed new ideas of neoliberalism in Madagascar. It was a replacement for Catholicism, which was waning in popularity. Pentecostalism brought with it a promise of various material gains for followers who were faithful, This ranges from curing sicknesses to literally increasing one's wealth if they pray and are dutiful about going to church. While this is the promise which gets them in the door, many find the relationship built between them and Jesus to be key, in the way in which it reframes the world around them. For women in the church, figuring out how to pay for new clothing and goods is not a problem, because these are viewed as unnecessary, if not harmful. It is also a path and an envisioning a future which exists in contrast to, and is even defined by its contrast to the lives of Junes. Preachers give examples of Junes and women that work in the sexual economy as negative examples for their followers. Instead of using the sexual economy to create a future for themselves, the church lets them find meaning in a future, even if it isn't the one they initially set out to create. Throughout the book, Cole describes many of the different conversations and interviews she had with women that she met in Tamatave and in surrounding towns. These discussions are good ways to understand the arguments that she made. So first, there is Julienne, who is a 29-year-old woman who moved from a rural area to Tamatave and has become disembedded from ancestral traditions and practices. She describes how she will go to ceremonies like bone turnings, but she simply goes. Her elders weren't happy about this, though, because to them, someone needs to actively participate in these ceremonies. But for a woman who is an urbanite, now she just doesn't feel the same connection anymore and thinks these ceremonies simply aren't that important. Then there is Najira, who is a 29-year-old woman who came to live in the city from rural areas and has consistently had bad luck. She became pregnant at age 18 and wanted to get rid of the child, but none of the methods she tried worked and ended up giving birth. She worked jobs as a maid and made only a small amount of money and lived in a shack in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Tamatave. She asked Cole to help her find a European boyfriend, but eventually Najira ended up dating a Malagasy man. He had a job, but got fired after being accused of stealing. Najira started making money by cooking and selling food on the side of the road, and she's able to make enough money to provide food for her children, but not much else. While she may have had visions of a grand life living in the city, her actual reality ended up to be much more difficult than she initially imagined. Now there is the case of Eudoxie, who is a prime example of a June, a woman who is young and uses her sexuality in nightclubs to meet a young Vaza. While she was previously a university student, she was able to drop her studies in school and go live with them. And she achieved the June goal and reached a happy and steady life, and one where she received approval from her family. Mama Tiliana has a similar story to Eudoxie, but was from a much poorer background. She, though, was able to work the nightclubs and eventually met a nice German man that she married. Her mom was proud of this and saw it as a great achievement for her, while her dad was somewhat disgusted. But it allowed her to start a family with greater social capital than she had previously had because of her Vaza husband. It also allowed her to exist in a respectable state in Tamatave as a well-off married woman. Then there is the story of Sylvie, who aspired to be a June and marry a Vaza. She engaged in sex work and at one point began a correspondence with the Vaza. Her boyfriend, though, was not a big fan of this, and the correspondence ended up falling through. She is still a sex worker, though, as her boyfriend cannot support her, and she exists in a social limbo. As a woman who is paid to have sex with Malagasy men, though, she is often mocked and derided in the community, but is able to make enough money to survive. And examples of women who joined the Pentecostal church. First, there is Mamani Lala, who is a woman who joined the Pentecostal church in search of wealth. Her pastor told her that he had a vision of her receiving a large sum of money from a mysterious woman, that she would invite her in because she remembered the words of God, who said to invite guests into your house. This helped compel her to stay with the church, and she dreams of someday owning a bigger and better house to help signal her respectability as a woman. Daily, though, she faces frustration from dependence on her husband's wages and attempting to outdo her siblings, and the church offers a path to a better lifestyle for her. Then there's Mammy and Jeanette, who are two older women in the church, who both cast off fancier clothing because of the church. Both talk about being attracted to fancier clothing, but then saw that church sessions don't require nice clothing, and the pastors actually suggested it was a bad thing for adherents to the church to dress in such fancy ways. Mammy reported preparing to wear velvet pants, but then hearing a voice from God saying she does not need to wear such flashy things. For both of these women, the problem of wanting nicer clothing was solved not through receiving money, but through the clothing no longer being needed.
Cole's work adds to several of the concepts we've been discussing in class, or seen in readings this semester. She shows how the theories of these other anthropologists function in an urban, contemporary context. Cole's subjects are geographically removed from the rural villages where most of the studies we've read were conducted, and they are often emotionally removed from the traditional culture of those rural villages. However, Cole's work shows how some of the ideas and insights anthropologists had while studying rural and/or traditional communities can still be applied to a very different urban setting. One of Cole's biggest points was about how young women in Tamatave use sexuality and sex work to strategically maneuver their way through the economic and social worlds to get the best outcome for themselves, both regarding marriage and just economically and socially in general. This is a continuation of Esther Boserup's ideas in The Economics of Polygamy. From a Western cultural perspective, we see polygamy and sex work as disempowering, but Cole and Boserup observe that women are engaging in these practices to try to create the best outcome for themselves, to empower themselves, financially, socially, and so on, as best they can within the disempowering systems they live in. In neither situation do women choose to fight against the system itself. Due to the economic landscape of Tamatave and Madagascar, it is more advantageous for Malagasy women to marry a Vizaha than a Malagasy man. Cole tells the story of Mama Tishiana, a young Tamatavian woman who met her German husband-to-be through engaging in sex work. Marrying him brought her immense social mobility and also drastically improved her bond with her family, strengthening a valuable and useful relationship. So we can see that pursuing this strategy dramatically improved her standing in more than one social network. Similarly, it can be economically advantageous for women in the rural farming communities Boserup studied to be married to a man with multiple wives, because it decreases the percentage of household labor that falls to her and increases her personal autonomy. Secondly, Cole's work on Junes adds to Ferguson's work on miners and cattle. They both explore how people choose what to invest in order to gain and maintain prestige. This is shown through June's investments in clothes and migrants' investments in cattle. Cole describes how Junes often invest their limited money in trendy clothes, cell phones, etc., in order to acquire social prestige or clout, because that will serve them in reaching their ends. She says, quote, "They try to use the consumption of certain commodities to position themselves within broader networks of exchange, thereby creating the identity they aspire to," end quote, and thereby creating solid opportunities for themselves. Similarly, Ferguson describes how migrant workers in Lesotho like to buy cattle with their earnings, and these cattle sort of stand in for them when they're away, a permanent outward demonstration of their power and prestige to keep that power going when they are not at home. Comparing Cole's work on Junes to Ferguson's work on migrant workers shows it's more useful to think of Junes' focuses on purchasing trendy items as a strategic social investment rather than a manifestation of insecurity. Both groups make these financial decisions out of a need to project certain images about who they are to people in their community so that they can earn prestige. It may seem strange to compare investments in clothes and cattle, but due to what Junes and these migrant workers are currently seeking in life regarding the intersection of financial security and social prestige, these are both investments to get them where they want to go through outward demonstrations to others.